Okay, so there is this concept called the post-expert digital age. There is also something called post-normal science now, which also relates to climate change, where the uncertainties are high, the values are not fully agreed upon by everybody, but the need for action is rather urgent. Right? So in the last chapter, we talked a little bit about the precautionary principle, saying we don't have all the luxury of waiting to ensure if climate change is really bad for us or bad for the environment. We need to act. So that's the precautionary principle. The post-expert digital age comes from this, so you can find this on this reference here. People like Amy Lewis do a lot of this nice work as well. Expert world was where you had things like telegraph, phone, where the communication tended to be one-on-one between two people, and there was a dialogue of, let's say, one who's considered an expert, the other one who's trying to learn or be the like a talk show host who would interview you and release that information for the audience, right? Then we went from one to many when broadcast communication like TV and radio and newspapers came along, where I would write an article somewhere and hopefully many thousands of people read it, or I would be on the radio or TV and everybody would listen to me saying something as the expert. Then came one to many, but many to one as well. So there was this feedback setup where you have groups like Google Hangout or Facebook or blogs and emails where you have a way. Let's say I set up a climate network of climate scientists in India. I broadcast something and they can feed back to me. So it was not just one to many, but also many to one. Okay. Now we are in the so-called post-expert world, where we have things like YouTube and Facebook, where one among many in the social media and many among many. So the conversation can be considered as a discovery of some sort. So people discuss together. There are some good things. For example, Facebook was setting up something called flash mobs, where people would say, come to the middle of DC for a snowball fight this evening, and several thousand people would show up. Or you post something and people will start debating, arguing, and so on. But the main point is called post-expert, because now when somebody posts something or begins a debate or begins to claim things, you don't always know whether that's an expert, and in fact oftentimes they are not experts, right? So anybody can go online and say climate change is a hoax and start posting stuff from media and institutions, in fact, and sources that provide you very legitimate looking things. Okay, so I'm recording this lecture, these courses, and putting on YouTube. You can Google me and see whether I have the background to do this or not, but it's not always the case. Okay, you can get a big following. We won't mention names, but you know that certain shows have huge followings and millions of dollars are paid to the host to propagate these misinformations, conspiracy theories, and so on. So that's something we have to deal with when it comes to climate change as well. And the good things like social networks end up becoming echo chambers. This is about retweet of something on a beef ban. And you can see how there are interfaces with very few interactions, but then they're taken back to the social network where there are so-called super spreaders, let's say, for COVID, we got this terminology, super spreaders, one or two people who ended up infecting many, 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 right? Same thing can happen in social networks. You tend to hang out with people who agree with you, who have similar views, and they tend to bring you news that you like because it's been filtered. And in fact, Google and Facebook and other outlets tend to feed you more of what you are already looking for, whether it's buying clothes and so on, or it's about climate change. So if you click on things, they are tracking them, then they will start to feed you more of that. So soon it can become an echo chamber where you just hear what you want to hear. And this is not just for lay people. This can happen, of course, for climate change scientists as well. This is why I said be aware of your confirmation biases and so on. There are many theories that say that we should always communicate with people who actually disagree with us, because then we learn more new things. But how many people really like to talk to people who don't agree with us, right? In a group where you already know the people, then it may be easier because you know the person very well already, based on growing up together, being in college, being in the dorm or whatever, being at work together or whatever, and you are able to tolerate the disagreements to a large extent. But there are situations like what happened in the last 4 years in US, where the disagreements became so strong and so large that people actually began to have problems with siblings and relatives and friends and so on, because you started to see things in the other side that you consider very wrong, and you didn't know the person had such controversial views. Controversial according to you, but as we said, 70 million people voted, so they make choices based on many factors. People get shocked that Hispanics voted for Trump, considering Trump said some very negative things about Hispanics and was very anti-immigrant and so on. And yet, they have to consider many factors to vote. So, this crossing the bridge to understand the other side also becomes important in climate change communication. So, even though I'm a climate change scientist, I have to be aware of all these echo chambers, post expert digital age, and echo chambers and so on, and make sure that I myself am not stuck in an echo chamber and am being dismissive of people who don't agree with me but are asking legitimate questions. That's the key word. When do you make sure that you are not dismissing people without proper dialogue?